Welcome back to another in our series of great chapters in the Bible. Our chapter today comes from the Old Testament book of Deuteronomy. Deuteronomy chapter 6. Moses commands these to be taught. Beginning in verse 1. Now this is the commandment, the statutes and the rules that the Lord your God commanded me to teach you, that you may do them in the land to which you are going over, to possess it, that you may fear the Lord your God, you and your son's son, by keeping all his statutes and his commandments, which I command you, all the days of your life, and that your days may be long. Hear therefore, O Israel, and be careful to do them, that it may go well with you, and that you may multiply greatly, as the Lord, the God of your fathers, has promised you in a land flowing with milk and honey. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your might. And these words that I command you today shall be on your heart. You shall teach them diligently to your children, and shall talk of them when you sit in your house, and when you walk by the way, and when you lie down, and when you rise. You shall bind them as a sign on your hand, and they shall be as frontlets before your eyes. You shall write them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates. When the Lord your God brings you into the land that he swore to your fathers, to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob, to give you, with great and good cities that you did not build, and houses full of all good things that you did not fill, and cisterns that you did not dig, and vineyards and olive trees that you did not plant. And when you eat and are full, then take care lest you forget the Lord, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. It is the Lord your God you shall fear. Him you shall serve, and by his name you shall swear. You shall not go after other gods, the gods of the peoples who are around you. For the Lord your God in your midst is a jealous God, lest the anger of the Lord your God be kindled against you, and he destroy you from off the face of the earth. You shall not put the Lord your God to the test, as you tested him at Massah. You shall diligently keep the commandments of the Lord your God, and his testimonies, and his statutes, which he has commanded you. And you shall do what is right and good in the sight of the Lord, that it may go well with you, and that you may go in and take possession of the good land that the Lord swore to give to your fathers, by thrusting out all the enemies from before you, as the Lord has promised. When your son asks you in time to come, what is the meaning of these testimonies and the statutes and the rules that the Lord your God has commanded you? Then you shall say to your son, We were Pharaoh's slaves in Egypt, and the Lord brought us out of Egypt with a mighty hand. And the Lord showed signs and wonders, great and grievous, against Egypt and against Pharaoh and all his household before our eyes. And he brought us out from there, that he might bring us in and give us the land that he swore to give to our fathers. And the Lord commanded us to do all these statutes, to fear the Lord our God, for our good always, that he might preserve us alive, as we are this day. And it will be righteousness for us if we are careful to do all this commandment before the Lord our God, as he has commanded us. My father was a very deliberate traveler. He knew what the destination was and set his mind on it, and that was that. Usually our trips, no matter how long, were one day's journey. Some of those days were long days. We would travel 800 miles or more in one day. In his younger years, a trip from Michigan to Florida, some 1,200 miles, was a non-stop journey. It was a, here we are, and there's where I want to be attitude. And there's something to be said for that. In high school, my English teacher handed out a packet of papers outlining what we were going to learn that semester. She used a word I was unfamiliar with, a syllabus. It clearly laid out what she was going to teach. It took the mystery out of what her objectives were for the course. In reality, that's what good teachers do. They don't just randomly decide what they'll teach. There's an intentional direction and goal, an end in sight for the class. In our chapter today, the whole objective of what God desires Moses to do and expectations are for the people of Israel, clearly laid out what they are to do, how they are to do it, and even when they are to do it. As a bonus, they are given the results of following these instructions, that your days may be long, in verse 2, that it may go well with you, and that you may multiply greatly, in verse 3. Wow, that is really ingenious of God to give them all the answers to having a good life. He's taken the hard part of figuring it out and made it easy. Now, mind you, all of this is before they enter the land that he had swore to their fathers. Imagine, if you will, that you are looking for a new home to relocate to. You read the brochure that describes the place. Cities and infrastructures already there. Houses fully furnished. Wells and gardens attached. The price? Free. Too good to be true? It has to be the catch. All you have to do is agree to the terms of the contract and obey the laws. Would you move there? It's worth noting in the New Testament that this very passage in Deuteronomy 6 is quoted by Jesus in Matthew 22, 32 through 40. But when the Pharisees heard that he had silenced the Sadducees, they gathered together, and one of them, a lawyer, asked him a question to test him. Teacher, which is the great commandment in the law? And he said to him, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the great and first commandment. And the second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. On these two commandments depend all the law and the prophets. Jesus, the Word, directly identifies the foundation of the law with these two commandments. And the first is that which you find in Deuteronomy 6:4. Jesus would quote this passage in another encounter with a scribe in Mark 12, when he asked which of the commandments was the most important of all. When Jesus answers with this verse from Deuteronomy 6 and also from Leviticus 19:18, you shall love your neighbor as yourself, the scribe, in a moment of clarity, responds in Mark 12:32 through 34, you are right, teacher. You have truly said that he is one and that there is no other besides him. And to love him with all the heart, with all the understanding, with all the strength, and to love one's neighbor as oneself is much more than all the burnt offerings and sacrifices. And when Jesus saw that he had answered wisely, he said to him, you are not far from the kingdom of God. And after that, no one dared to ask him any more questions. Now, with the goal in mind of what they are to teach, Moses then proceeds to tell them how and when to teach it. But it's more than just rote memorization that Moses is after. This isn't a how much can you memorize or how fast can you learn these goal that he has in mind. Although the word used diligently here is akin to how one sharpens a piece of metal by repeatedly moving it over a whetstone. To put a fine edge on an instrument requires diligent and repeated friction over the stone. Notice that the lessons aren't just those taught in the religious setting of the tabernacle and temple, but those taught at home and in everyday activities. They weren't compartmentalized, but that which permeated the life. Everywhere one looked, there was the reminder of God's commandments. Yet in these was the love God extends and the love they returned to him. Notice then that it was the parents' responsibility to have an answer for their children in the future as to what the meaning of all this that has been commanded. It would be far too easy to simply follow as tradition and thus say, because God said so reasoning. But the true reasons lie in the experiences surrounding these testimonies and statutes and rules. If I were to stop and think about this, I might realize that there just might be a connection to this technique and the sharing of the Lord's Supper each first day of the week in remembrance of Christ in the bread and the cup. It's hard to forget something that you are constantly being reminded of. And have you been busy telling the old story? lest we forget. Lord willing, let's meet here again tomorrow and look at another of the great chapters in the Bible.